Hi everybody, my name's Kay. You're watching Amidst the Gray. And today, I'm going to do a midwinter 2023 Techo Kaigi update, featuring the addition of my own version of a Resistance Zero list to my planner. Let's do it. I've said it before and I'll say it again. This winter has been a bit on the topsy-turvy side as far as just health and being busy kind of randomly out of nowhere, very intensely for several days at a time. Not a lot of gray in between the black and the white. It's just been that kind of season. It's better. It's better now. February hasn't been too bad. Hopefully that equilibrium will be, kind of here to stay for a while and just establish a bit of the foundation to set up for the rest of the year. I am drinking my beloved Black Spiral, the same tea that I featured in my Best of Capricorn season video. This is my backup tin. I have a tin, this is my work tin, and I have a tin at home. I have a tin of this pretty much every main place that I go because I don't ever like being without this. But yeah, this is my second or third cup. And I've had 2 cups of coffee today. I probably had entirely too much caffeine, but that's kind of been the nature of this year so far. I wanted to do this midwinter Techo Kaigi update, so this is essentially part 2 because I have made a change to my planner. My planner is the same. It's that part hasn't changed. It's still my standard size Midori. That part hasn't changed. It's not going to. I don't anticipate for probably forever. I don't know yet. But so this part hasn't changed. But I have added a list, a very specific list. The premise for me putting this Resistance Zero list in here, I was really feeling a bit overwhelmed with everything. And when I get to that point, I like to do, I guess a lot of people would call it a brain dump or a mind sweep or insert phrase from your particular system of choice here. Just one of those things where you just unload everything that's in your head onto a piece of paper or into a Word document or whatever your preferential system of choice is. And when I get to that point where I'm feeling overwhelmed, I like to do that. The issue I have with brain dumps, and that, well, not so much now because I've got this dialed in, but is just getting everything unloaded. And then the issue for me was always mostly the processing. And I realized there are systems out there like GTD, like Getting Things Done, which is a spectacular system if you are a strategic, more left brain oriented individual, which I absolutely am not. There are aspects of GTD that I like and that I do implement into my system. But as far as the structure as a whole, I could not keep up with it. I found myself thinking more about the system than I did about the actual contents within the system. When I get to the point where I'm thinking about the system more than the contents, I know it's not a good fit for me. In 2017, I discovered Mark Forster. Not that Mark Forster. I will link Mark Forster's, I think it's a Squarespace blog kind of setup. I will link that in the description. Mark Forster is a productivity figure, I guess you could say, who has developed over the years several different systems and approaches for implementing time and task management into whatever your life looks like. Mark has several systems in place that he has created and refined over the past several years. But for a very long time, my favorite was his autofocus system. Version 1. There are several versions. I think there are 4 main versions, and then there are multiple revised versions of certain versions, subversions of versions. But his original version 1 was the approach that resonated with me the most. And essentially, autofocus version 1 it's a single list, but each page represents almost a list within a list. He calls that a closed list. And sometimes that can work well for me, particularly if I am feeling like I need to really push and get some things accomplished. But after a while, I just burn out and I get rid of it completely because I don't want anything to do with it. So it's great in theory and in practice for me to an extent, but it's never been a sustainable option for me. I recently revisited Mark's blog, and there were a bunch of posts about this resistance zero, and I had never heard of it. It was something that was developed after I kind of quit following him, to the extent that I did in the past. And I started looking at this, his idea for this resistance zero list and some modifications that he ended up making and some comments from some users. And I remember I read through and I was thinking, this might work long term for me, which is something that I've been kind of looking for with regards to just kind of a running list. One of the things I like most about the resistance zero approach is that it emphasizes items that are not time and date specific. If it's time and date specific, it belongs on a calendar. Period. End of story. At least for me personally, the way I work, and that's how that works for me. There might be items on the list that eventually kind of morph or evolve into time and date specific, but initially, like in kind of the planning or just brainstorming idea stage, they're not time and date specific. I am not obligated to those things at any time. There is no schedule. There is no deadline. Items, tasks, whatever that I have listed in my resistance zero list, I know that I can write those down. I can leave them there. And I am under absolutely no obligation to ever revisit them again if I don't want to. And I like that. I think a trap that many people fall into sort of with to-do lists and running lists is you write the items down and then you get in the mindset that you are now bound to this list of things that may or may not be important. In fact, if you were to go over the majority of the contents in that list, you'll ask yourself, does this really even matter? But it's just a place to just put those things. You put those things there, and they're safe and sound, and they're tucked in your system, and you can revisit them. But you're under no obligation. If you find yourself in the mindset, I have to do this, there are probably some other things that need examining, either in your own personal feelings and self or within your system. Since we'll be in my planner, I will do a quick overview of my January, February month on 2 pages because that's working well. It always works well. I said before, if I could only have one, it would be a month on 2 pages, the monthly view, month at a glance for me, because I can make anything work in that. The only thing that is limited for me would be space, but in a standard size, I can get everything in a month in that size and with room to spare, just because of the way I've done it for the past few years. I'll also talk about what I'm doing with weekly stuff, just because it's a thing and I'm not sure exactly where I'm at with that and whether or not what I'm doing now is what I want to keep doing. So I'm kind of working that out. As for the rest of my books that I featured in my Techo Kaigi Part 1, I won't be touching on any of those in this video simply because I haven't done anything with any of those. With the exception of my seasonal journal, that's going to be its own series, and I will do, when Pisces season is over, so right before spring, I will do kind of a flip through, just kind of a simple, maybe just set to music, just kind of low key and chill, of all my entries for winter, because there are some bits and pieces of my seasonal journal that are kind of shifting a little bit, but I'm still in the stages of kind of playing around with that, and I'm not ready to show that to the public yet. That being said, the majority of the video will be centered on my Resistance Zero list, just kind of looking at it, going over how Mark envisioned it would work and how what I do that's similar and what's different. I think I covered everything for the most part that that I wanted to touch on in the intro. Like I said, I'll provide some links, and as we go through, I'll explain in a little more detail how I actually work through and sift through and process the list once items get written down. Okay, let's take a look at my list.
Before we get into the Resistant Zero list, I felt it might actually be more prudent to do the monthly check-in and kind of go over my weekly woes, just to kind of get that top-down perspective as far as how kind of my flow and my processing of all of this works. Also, for the sake of context and clarity, I'll quickly review kind of my life situation, my background, and how it sort of relates to my approach to this whole planning thing. So, I am 41 years old. I am a single parent of one child who is 17. He is a senior in high school. He has his license, he has his own vehicle, he takes care of a lot of his own stuff. But anything medical for him, I do still go with him for that because he is 17 and not yet 18, and sometimes I have to give parental consent. But other than that, he takes care of a lot of his own things. I have worked in public education for the past 12 years. I am a library technician for middle school. I also teach our yearbook class, and I am the club advisor for that group. I do participate in the occasional team and committee. I volunteer a little bit of time both in and out of school, and I have an 11-year-old cat who essentially runs the house. And now I also have a YouTube channel, which does factor into my regular routine as far as deciding what I need to do and what I'm going to do on any particular day. That basically sums up kind of my life in a nutshell as far as responsibilities and tasks related to those things. As I said in my intro, my planner itself has not changed. It is still my standard size brown Midori Traveler's notebook. I got this notebook in 2016 when they were still branded as Midori versus Traveler's Company, Traveler's Notebook. I have been in and out, mostly in this book for one reason or another since then, and it has become what I would call my everyday carry and my planner for the last 3 years since the middle of 2020. This thing is my ride or die. It goes with me everywhere. It's in my bag or on the table or my desk near me. On the outside, I have the clear folder. This is this year's clear folder, the coffee theme. I actually prefer it on the outside of the notebook versus the inside just because it's easy access. And in here I have those clear or translucent dotted stickers. Those are pivotal to my monthly. I have some spare paper that I use for my Resistant Zero list. There's a random gift card that I've had for 2 years and haven't used. I have some stencils that I can't for the life of me remember where I got. And I keep my writing board, and I know everybody's seen it, but can we just look at it again because it's just so pretty. It has the standard measurements and the grid that is typical from the Traveler's Company writing boards. A part of me wants to go and collect all the writing boards, but I think that could get really expensive really quickly. So I'm trying not to invest myself too much in that. There's some Resistant Zero notes. I will be putting screenshots of this, what you see here, up when we get to that part, just so you can see it a little more clearly. There are the tab stickers, which I actually used this year on the monthly. I have never used the tabs before this year. I'm actually going to take those colored dots out just in case I need to add an entry to my monthly. I don't anticipate doing that, but just in case. And so I'll tuck that aside for now. Before I actually open the notebook, I will just show you the leather and how mine has aged over the course of the past almost 7 years. My leather is really buttery. It's extremely soft and it's not suede at all. It's like the opposite of suede. It's shiny and it's smooth. There's the Midori stamp, the original Midori stamp. It's very scuffed, it's very dinged, and I love it that way. I do have my simplify charm at the end of my bookmark because it's always a good reminder to not overthink things. And this button has been on it pretty much since I got it. I got that at Joann's. I was not in Joann's not looking for a button, and but I found that one and I thought it was a perfect match, and so I put it on there. This is my go-to pen. It's my 3-barrel High-Tech C Coletto. And in there I have a zero point 0.5 pink, a zero point 0.3 blue black, and a zero point 0.4 brown. I actually prefer the zero point 0.4, but I have some refills in various sizes that I'm trying to use. So that's what I have in there right now. The brown and the blue black are kind of my two go-to colors as far as my planner, and I use my pink for cycle tracking purposes. On the top there I do have my two brass clips. After removing the elastic, you can see even more scuffs in on the front, and this is one of my favorite things to do is flatten it and look at the spine creases. I don't know why that brings me such joy, but it just does. I love this thing. I don't even want to think about what it would be like to not have it. As we open it up on the top left, there is my little pocket. I have my little ametrine card that I got with an order, and the keyword is intuition, and I kept it. And I also keep a little fortune in there that says avoid thinking about the negative aspects of the past, which is always a good reminder. In the front, I have the pocket part of the Traveler's Company zipper pouch, and I like to keep the insert from my dated monthly in there just because it's pretty to look at. Photos that I still have not changed out. Those were the same photos that were in my part one. And here we get to the monthly, which is the driver of my entire system. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think I said this in my intro actually. My monthly is the one thing that I don't want to be without in my planner. I have been in this insert since 2020, and I have my 2021. 2022 is when it really started to come into its own for me. I started using more color coding, figuring out what I wanted for that, and it essentially morphed into the system that I am still currently using. But this monthly, it's my big picture at a glance overview, and that's what I need for my brain to function. So this insert is really I wouldn't say it's the meat and potatoes, but it informs the meat and potatoes, and it does it in a way that makes sense to me. In fact, in 2020, I started with a Hobonichi Day Free, and I quickly realized that I did not like it, and I found a deep discounted 2020 insert, and I went and got it, which is what you see there. So on the front, I have the ephemera bits that came with the insert, as well as stickers that came from the sticker pack. And then there's the second sticker that came with the dated. That's from the sticker pack. The little easel, more ephemera, sticker from an apple. The park sticker is a gift from a student, and the Murdog is also a gift from a student. Two different students who like to give me stickers, and I am here for it. As we open the monthly up, this is, I think, the same as my part one. I have my tarot card of the year on the left, which is the Hangman pocket sticker that I originally had on the left but didn't like it, so I moved it to the right. I have some sticky notes there that I use for making notes if it's something is very tentative, and I have my personal year 3 with some keywords. There is the 2 years at a glance with some weeks highlighted there. This is the little tracker thing. I'm using it for cycle tracking purposes. I've never completely filled one of these out, and I think I want to do that this year. My cycle start days, my bleed days are in the pink, and I also included the moon phases just because that is relevant and practical for me. So I would like to fill that up this year. Before we go deeper into the pages, I just thought I would show you my two clips. The clip on the left I've had for 3 years. The clip on the right is new to me as of late last year, but it's getting a bit of patina on the back, particularly on the top where I touch it with my fingers a lot. And I just can't wait for it to age. So here we have December of 2022. Instead of covering the entire month like I typically would, I decided to leave the bottom at the from the winter solstice onward open, and at the top do sort of an Alistair method forward, just kind of noting of things that were coming up due, like irregular expenses, and just some notes, just kind of one-off things that I wanted to keep in mind. Here is January. January was a tough month, particularly for health for both my son and for me. And my cat actually did not get out unscathed. But for January, I did the little arrow washi tape because it was kind of moving forward. And I have a lot of dots here. My color coding basically goes: yellow is for special occasions, holidays, or observance days. Blue is work related, green is me, orange is my son, and pink is my cat. And January is a great month because all 5 colors are featured. I do go back and make notes of when certain things happen, like I got sick in that second week with that green sticker there, and following day the pink sticker. My cat also got sick, and so I just made a note of how when we got sick that first day and how long we were sick for. And then at a glance, this is just a reminder for me that this was a busy month for my son. There's a lot of orange concentrated kind of at the end of the month. He had a lot of things going on for his recruitment. And just so that kind of visually just helps me remember, oh yeah, we had a lot going on that month. These empty squares, I think, are some of the most underutilized spaces in monthly inserts. I often see people cover them up, and for me, that's just room to write notes. And if I run out of spaces in a box, I can make a little note and use one of those empty boxes to kind of create a key. So we had an emergency staff meeting, and then there were some paperwork supplementations that we had to get done for my son's recruitment. So I just made those little notes up there in the corner and put the corresponding letters in the appropriate boxes, and then made some notes for other various things at the bottom. I did make a little boo-boo in the middle of the page on a couple of things, and so I just put some scraps of washi tape in there because I'm not precious about it. I wanted it covered, but I didn't want to make a big deal about it, so washi to the rescue. So here's February, the current month we were in. And the first thing, like when I look back on this, the first thing I will notice is how much blue is on this page. And blue is work related. And we are doing an assessment this month. A colleague of mine and we are doing the administration. And so that is just for the blue for work is for things that are not a part of my typical everyday. I make that note on there that it's outside of my regular kind of routine. And so that's why there's so much blue. There are some observance days there in yellow. My son has a couple of things in orange, including a trip to the ER that I made a note of. He broke out in head-to-toe hives. It was a little scary. On the 11th there, he had his second Saturday event for his recruitment, and then he has a dentist appointment Monday afternoon. So that's what's going on for him. And then I have a couple of stickers there in green, but the majority of February has been blue. And I've made it a point to try and be home a little bit more this month on the weekends, just for energy recovery purposes. And so I've noted that very prominently on a couple of weeks there, including the first week and the third week. I actually didn't note it for this week, but I am definitely not going anywhere this weekend. I have made a few notes for March. For work, I have a deadline to remember. Yellow is my dad's birthday at the top there on the 5th. The 18th and 19th, we have a very, very big 2-day senior class fundraiser. My son and I are both participating, so that's why both of our colors are there. And then on the 20th, the sun moves into Aries, and that's an observance day for me. April, I have marked our spring break days. May, I have another work deadline to keep in mind, and then the Memorial Day on the bottom there. June is both my son's 18th birthday and his graduation. That happens within 2 days. That entire weekend, actually from that Thursday on, is going to be a huge and busy time this year. July, I noted Independence Day, and as well as my aunt's birthday. August is empty. August is a slow month for me. September, I've marked Labor Day. October, I think I marked Halloween. There it is. November, I marked Veterans Day, but not Thanksgiving, interestingly. I'll go back and do that later. And then Christmas, I don't think I've noted at all. So I will cross that bridge when I get there. I was just kind of in a groove with noting future events, and for some reason I had to stop. And that's totally fine because I don't have to have that all done right away. There's the other half of that photo, that card slot, and I do have a zero point 0.4 refill in there for my blue black for when I run out of my 0.3. I just want to make sure I keep it in there. And now we come to my weekly. And I made that weekly face in my intro for a reason, simply because weeklies and I don't always get along. And I think the main issue is that I have for a very long time tried to convince myself that I need a weekly all the time. And I just don't feel that is true. There are some weeks, particularly in the summer, where I just don't feel the need to have one at all because I'm typically home a lot during the summer because I'm not at school. And there are those stretches of time when I just don't feel I need to have everything mapped out to that extent. So I'm starting to come to peace with the idea that I don't have to have a weekly all the time. Sometimes I can just have a daily if I want, but again, I don't have to have them all the time. The monthly I need all the time, period, end of story. But the weekly, I'm coming to the conclusion that I just don't feel that's the case for me. The insert you see before you on the right there with the green cover is the only Traveler's Company weekly insert that I have never tried, and it is the undated vertical insert. I've tried the dated vertical, the dated horizontal plus memo, and the undated horizontal plus memo, and I essentially abandoned them all. Actually, last year I did the horizontal with memo, and I got through for the latter half of the year, and I got through just about almost the entire insert just because I had it, but I kind of just felt like it was being forced a little bit because it was there. And I'm figuring out that there are certain aspects of weeklies that I like and aspects that I don't like. And what I'm leaning toward now, potentially after June, when this insert is no longer relevant, I will probably end up making my own with the bits and pieces that I do click with. On the front cover at the top, there is one of the stickers from the custom sticker pack from the 2023 coffee theme, and then random stickers from a cinnamon bottle and an essential oil bottle because I just like peeling labels off of things and sticking them in notebooks. Yeah, it brings me great joy to build on that and collage over it as time goes on. Okay, let's go ahead and open this up. Just on the immediate inside cover, that is the 018 is the number of the insert, the undated vertical, and again, a pocket that I had on the left but didn't like, and then moved it to the right. I have not used those tracker pages. I might cover them. That was the week of Christmas where I actually stuck photos in there, and there's me drawing lines down just to cover up the times to see if they would bother me less. It didn't work. I'm using it. I am in it, but I'm not overly enthusiastic about it. I don't know if I'm enthusiastic ever about weeklies at all, no matter what I'm doing. I feel my main motivation for getting this one is because I'm a natural vertical list maker, and I feel this was a great format potentially for making those vertical lists while at the same time somewhat being structured by day. I am writing the daily wordles in the date boxes just because my students, a few of them like to do the wordle during breakfast time, and I've been keeping a record of what the words are because sometimes they will go back and reference that, and I can open my planner and look. For the vertical columns, I'm essentially just ignoring the times. I'm ignoring the times, and I do not use those colored dots in the vertical. I only use those for the monthly. I'm essentially ignoring the times, and I'm just making a long vertical list of just kind of mapping out my day. That's what this is for me. It's a map. It's not time specific. And if I deviate from the map, it's just because I took a detour, and it's really okay. But some days, like on that Saturday, I ended up making a little bit more of a detailed list just because there were some things I needed to kind of focus on and get accomplished. And there is a corresponding washi tape down there from January. I put the same washi tape, the arrow washi tape, on the bottom of the weeks as I do my month. Just I'm not. This is a functional thing for me, but the little splotches of washi color I kind of like, and so I've tried to include that in, except I ran out of that one for February, and I'm kind of had to tear bits and pieces off. Like I said, not overly enthused, but I am in it, and I'm also noting the days of my cycle in pink up at the top there, just so I have that at a glance. I'm not precious with how I'm using this at all. It varies week by week, and I'm okay with changing that. And some weeks, like this week is a perfect example, is when I would feel the need to have a daily list on Tuesday, random day. Just, it was a day where I felt like I had a lot in my head for that particular day, and I just needed to map it out. And I will either do that either on my clipboard, which you see on the right. There is a President's Day weekend list. We'll go over that in just a few minutes. I have my little pocket sticker underneath there. So I will either make a daily list on my clipboard, particularly if I'm at home, or if I'm at work, which I was on this day, I will do it on a lined sticky note and then just stick it right there on my weekly. And that works really, really well. So this past Tuesday, the 21st, I just had a lot that I felt needed my attention on that day. So I essentially divided that little sheet in half with a dotted line, and the top half was work stuff, bottom half was personal stuff. I checked off what I completed, and I moved forward things I didn't, and then there was one thing that I crossed off because that ended up getting delegated. My son offered to go to the store for me after school and pick up those things that we needed, and so I was able to cross that list off. For work, I did not do my repair tickets for the Chromebooks. I actually ended up doing those on the 23rd, which I checked off and noted the date. And then the big litter box clean out for my cat, I did not get to, so I moved that forward as well. But everything else I got done. I went to the post office, I picked up my son's meds, and I finished my other work tasks up there, my emails and my fundraiser and my login information. And just getting that out on its own list brought a real sort of sense of relief. So this is a great example of an instance where I feel the need to have a daily list. Doesn't happen every day, but it does happen. It was also this week that I noticed my attention getting drawn to the boxes, the date boxes at the top of the page. Essentially, that single extract of a calendar week just put at the top of the page. My eye kept going back to those dated boxes. And then I remembered a few things that I tried last year in a weekly, and I got those inserts out. And look what I did there. I essentially recreated that line of dates at the top of a weekly and then sort of just did a daily. This was very much almost like a bullet journal style where I would do like a daily log and then just make notes. But that dated line of dates at the top, I really instinctively, I always seem to eventually put those there because they work for me. And there was me trying a horizontal because I feel like I need to be in a horizontal when I absolutely do not. But this was something I worked in last year, and it was a hodgepodge. It was dailies, some long form journaling, some monthly reviews, some card inserts, There's an autofocus list because I often feel the need to go back to autofocus. Here, look at what I wrote. No matter how much I want to like the vertical layout, I just can't do it. I figured out what I do like. The dates and the squares at the top as a quick reference. I could easily do that for every week and do daily entries free flow. I figured that out last year. Have I done that consistently? Absolutely not. And another thing I miss is the Alistair method approach for the weekly, where I would do Monday through Sunday, note down my appointments, what time, what day they were, check them off when I did them, or any other just things that come up. And I'm figuring out for me a weekly, the things I go back to are those dates at the top and an Alistair method style weekly. But I have all of these pages at the back. I did cover those back ones in grid. I'm half tempted to cover all those pages in grid or get some cream colored whiteout and white out those times and make that blank pages so I can have my dates at the top but have blank space underneath to do those things that I want to do, just kind of that free form daily if I want, and then an Alistair method kind of weekly map maybe on the right or underneath on the left. It's a thing, and I'm working on figuring out the thing, but I'm not sure yet. I might actually cover next week in some grid and see how that goes, and maybe if I feel kind of at home with it. So let's go to my clipboard and my President's Day weekend list. Here is another example of when I don't need a list for a specific day, but for a group of days. And this was that 3-day weekend where I just felt the need to, I was really, really, really in that mode to just do things. And I'm kind of there this weekend as well. So what I'm going to do is kind of duplicate that, but except for a 3-day weekend, it'll just be a standard 2-day weekend. So Saturday, February 25th and Sunday, February 26th. So as far as appointments, I will note that I have nothing scheduled because that keeps me more in the mindset that I'm at home and I have a lot of freedom to do things at home that need to be done. And I will make a note. My son is working out of town this weekend at a construction site, and he will be home tomorrow in the afternoon sometime. So I'm just noting that he's out. So essentially, I have nothing scheduled and I have the house to myself. That sort of gets me in a mindset. And that's where Resistant Zero comes in. It really, really brings mindset and intuition into play, which I'm finding is really, really valuable for mapping that out. I'm going to duplicate the filming section that I did for my President's Day list because I am kind of in a filming mood. So I'm noting that I'm going to film my midwinter Techo Kaigi, which is the video that you are watching now. I'm only filming the main because I filmed the intro weeks ago and haven't filmed the rest of it. And then I did an E and a U for edit and upload, except instead of putting it on the side like I did on my President's Day list, I'm putting it or on the right side, I guess. I'm putting it on the left side. So I want to film that. I want to film archiving my 22 inserts. I've been meaning to do that for a while. I haven't done it. That would be a relatively quick, easy film, I think. So I will edit and upload for that and check those off for when I complete each one of those steps in relation to that video. And then the other video I might start is my Best of Aquarius season. I have not begun that video yet, and I have both the intro and the main to do, and so I will note each of those separately because for most of my videos I do film the intro separately. On occasion I don't, but I usually do, and then the E and the U for edit and upload. So that's kind of filming, things related to filming that I want to do this weekend. And then other things, I did not start my taxes last weekend. I moved that over. So I'm going to put that down because I don't have to get them done, but I can at least get them started. And then I'm also noting that I need to do a money review. I do typically do that every weekend. Some days I miss and I end up doing it sometime during the week, but I really want to do it before I go back to work on Monday. And then I'm also noting I need to do a freezer pull, which is something I usually do on the weekend, but not not always, but I do need to do it this time. And then I just kind of casually just chill for a minute and look around my house and look around my kitchen and just kind of assess, is there anything else that I just should tend to today or tomorrow? Because this is a weekend list. And I do know that my plants need tended to. They need watered. And I also think I'm going to move a couple because depending on the time of year, some of my plants do better in certain parts of the house than others. And so I kind of rotate them. And so I think I want to sort of tend to that this weekend as well. So that is my weekend list. Now we'll take a look at the Resistant Zero list, which I have unceremoniously just plopped in the middle of my vertical weekly. I had some spare MD cream paper from an insert that I got hanging around. And so what I did was I completely took that insert apart and I ran that paper through my printer, which didn't end well for the crease, but it's in the middle and nobody's going to see it, so I'm not worried about it. Because it was blank paper and I wanted grid, not just grid, but 6mm grid. Most grid paper from Japanese stationery companies, including Midori, print in 5mm, but I have a thing for 6mm grid. My handwriting is a little big and I just like to have the extra space. And I just love the joy of writing on MD paper. So even though this is completely disposable and I will recycle it eventually, I get the joy of writing on it for the time that I have it. I suppose I should clarify that I do consider my daily entries disposable. I do not need to keep them. If it's long form journaling, that's different than just a list of things to do. I don't need to keep those. If there's anything pertinent that I feel needs to get recorded for a particular thing on a particular day, I will note that in my monthly, because that's the insert that I constantly will go back to for reference. So I will note that in my monthly should that need come up. My dailies, I don't need them. When I'm finished with them, they can go away. Okay, back to Resistant Zero. So as I said in my intro, Resistant Zero is an approach to task management that was developed by Mark Forrester. I will link the blog post that features the information I'm about to show you in the description box, and from there you can access information about all of Mark's other systems. Mark is a really interesting guy. He is a tinkerer. He likes to develop systems and then tweak and refine them. And he has a loyal following of people who like to tweak and modify his systems, and then sometimes whole new systems get developed. So it's an interesting process. But this Resistant Zero is actually quite new. It was developed in 2022, which is very, very new compared to, for example, Autofocus 1, I think was developed in 2009, maybe even earlier than that. One commonality that I've noticed throughout Mark's systems over the years is the importance and emphasis on bringing in your intuition when it comes to processing tasks that you might want to do but don't necessarily have to do. But sometimes we get in the trap of feeling like we have to do everything that we write down or everything that we think of, when in actuality we really don't. And his emphasis on just those quick and simple intuitive blips regarding what's important in the moment is something that really resonates with me as far as addressing those things that are not necessarily pertinent or a necessity right now. For me, this Resistant Zero list is like a bank. It's a bank of tasks that are not time or day specific. They can potentially become that depending on what they morph into, but at that present moment, they're not related to a specific day or time in which something has to happen or occur. I can make deposits into that bank and I can make withdrawals. I can add to the list as I see fit, and I can go through the list and process those items as I see fit. The importance of distinguishing between what is time date specific and what is not is really key here, just because if it's time or date specific, for me personally, it belongs on a calendar or it belongs on a daily list, like one of those lists that I made on my clipboard or on a sticky note. It's all of those other little things that creep into our brains at random times throughout the day that you're like, oh, well, that might be fun, or that might be useful, or that might be worth trying, or that might be enjoyable. All those things that might be, not that have to be, but that might be. It's important to make that distinction when you are entering items into a list such as this. If you're familiar with GTD, you can almost think of this as sort of a someday maybe list for those random little snippet bits, and someday could be tomorrow. It just depends on what's going on in your life and how you're feeling when that time comes. I'm now going to insert some excerpts from the blog post on Mark's website so you can follow along. And I'm going to start with item 1 on this first bit here. It's essentially a step-by-step of how to carry this out. So item 1 is write out a list of the things you have to do. I don't use that word. I would say want to do or would like to do. You can build the list up gradually, but the aim is to eventually cover everything in your life that doesn't happen on a set time basis. You can add further tasks at any time. Number 2, starting at the end of the list, scan back through the list, dotting every task which you feel zero resistance to doing. Number 3, starting from the end, take at least some action on every task you've dotted. Re-enter as necessary. And number 4, repeat steps 2 through 4. In his notes, zero resistance means absolutely no resistance whatsoever. You must do a complete scan at step 2 so that every task is considered. This is very important because it is the scanning process that reduces the resistance you feel for each task. If you skip or foreshorten the scan, resistance will rise instead of fall. This is intended to be a fast scan so that your brain selects the tasks for action without conscious thought. It's similar, though not identical, to the standing out process used in many of my systems. That's including his autofocus system. He then published an amendment, which I feel is important because this really reflects how I personally process the list. In the amendment and recommendation, he states, as I've gained more experience with the resistant zero system, I found that it works a bit better if the scan is done from the beginning to the end and the dotted tasks are actioned from the end to the beginning. I'm also personally finding that it works best if the scan is done quickly without any lengthy attempts to decide whether a task is at zero resistance. So I say no resistance at the start of the scan, but I don't repeat it again during the same scan. The scanning piece is really, really important because what it does is it begins to activate that sort of subconscious sifting process of what you have in front of you and what you might be more inclined to lean toward regarding taking action on something on your list. So the scanning piece, and I found this to be true, absolutely is a critical element in working through a list like this. Mark's amendment recommendation of scanning the list from the beginning to the end versus the end to the beginning, I find to be more effective, and then doing the actioning from the end to the beginning, as he said in his amendment, I found that to be really, really effective, just because when you scan from beginning to end, you're still getting a holistic view of what you have on your list and what you have taken the time to have written down. But by actioning from the end, you are perhaps addressing some things that are more pertinent to you in that moment because they're newer. And also it will give you an opportunity to gradually over time take a look at those items that you've written down and assess, why haven't I done this? Or why haven't I felt and why haven't I felt zero resistance toward taking action on this particular item? And if that same item or that same set of items keeps showing up, then that is an indicator for you to maybe assess why you're feeling resistance, because it could be a deeper issue than you might originally realize, or it might be just you felt like you needed to write it down, but you actually don't care about it at all. So it could range from really needing to do some work inside of yourself to I didn't really want to do that in the first place, and I wrote it down because I felt I had to. One step where I tend to deviate from what Mark recommends is the process of reentry. Reentry is a big part of his autofocus system and a lot of his systems in general. He's a big advocate and proponent of the little and often approach, which means if you just do some work on it, you don't have to complete it, but just start or continue. It builds his thinking is that it builds momentum over time. And I can absolutely see where that's a valid argument. I tend to not, and then you just cross it out after you've done whatever work you feel like doing on it in that moment, and then you re-enter it. I find it, for me personally, more effective to not cross out and re-enter. Instead, I have a little notation system of when I enter a task, when I action a task, and when I complete a task. I'm actually thinking of adding another column for starting, just because actioning and starting for me are not always one and the same. So I'm thinking about adding a fourth column. I don't tend to re-enter tasks unless I go through a process of what Mark calls dismissal. Dismissal is not a part of Resistant Zero. It's a big part of autofocus. And I still use dismissal. We'll get to those. You might see the highlighted items there. We'll get to those once I start working the list. But I will re-enter if I end up dismissing a task, as far as maybe it needs to be reworded or just kind of rethought out. But the same task, I tend to not cross out and re-enter it. I work it until it's complete. That was a very long bit of context, but I feel context is important and I like to be thorough. So I just want to make sure everyone has an opportunity to see those resources and to kind of get that background. So when I start working the list, things might make a little bit more sense. So this is my first page of my Resistant Zero list. I started it January 3rd. Of 2023 of this year. I do not make myself get in this every day. It's not a have to thing. This is a tool at my disposal for me to use both when I'm feeling like kind of pumped energy wise and I have things that should be done and need to be done. Those are addressed and I have some energy to just maybe do some other things, and I can look at this list and see what I've written down and determine at that time, is anything worth my time that's on this list? You know, I took the time to write it down, so I should evaluate as to whether or not this might be the time to take action on any of these things. As you will see, there are days, weeks at a time, where I don't touch this. I might go look at it, but I might not necessarily enter anything. So I entered a huge bank of tasks on the 3rd. The 3rd is listed in that column on the left there. And then underneath that, I didn't enter anything until the 11th, because between the 3rd and 11th, that's when we were a very sick household. And that was not a priority. But I did have some things that were processed during that time, but I didn't add anything to that list. On page 2, my start date was January 12th. My end date was January 16th, and I have not completed that page. I still have open items. So I have dates vary. I entered a ton of stuff on the 14th for page 2. And then a few for the 15th. 16th is I have a couple. And then the 17th, I had a bunch on page 3. And then the 20th, also a huge amount. And page 3, I started the list on the January 16th. I ended it on January 20th. And I did actually complete this page, which is noted with a cross, an X, in the upper right-hand corner. This is a technique that Mark uses for autofocus, and I find it useful, so I use it for this as well. If pages 2 or 1 before that were also completed, I would put a circle around that X just to show that no other pages before that had anything active. And then there are a lot of pink notations on page 3, and that was because I had a lot of items to add to a shopping list, which is noted on that top line there, and all of those items were things I needed to add to that list, and they were related to that list, and I did not have my clipboard next to me, so I just did a big add-on through for there. Sometimes things like that do make it onto this list, particularly if I'm in a flow and I just am going and I don't want to stop. Page 4 marks the transition from January to February, and it's noted with that line there in the middle. And as you can see, I really haven't entered a whole lot of items for February, particularly because I already had a lot entered previously throughout January. And a lot of the things that I've done this month, I've kind of just either I thought of them and I did them, or I haven't had as much time to address these other things that are not time and date specific. That happens sometimes if I have a lot going on at work, like for example, I do now. Sometimes this list doesn't get touched a whole lot. I am going to add one item for today. I have been wanting to rearrange my bedroom furniture. That is not something that has to be done. It's something I want to do. So I'm going to notate today's date, which is the 25th, on the entered column. And then I'm just going to write bedroom furniture rearrange. I know a lot of systems and proponents of systems recommend starting items with an action, but I almost find that to be counterproductive for me personally, because it's like my list is telling me what to do, and I don't want to be told what to do. I'm just that way, I suppose. And so I tend to phrase it in a way that is a little more open and fluid, and that might sound ridiculous, but I don't want my list to boss me around, especially when it's stuff I don't have to do. This is a tool that works for me, and it's not going to tell me what to do. Adding new items tends to be the first thing I do when I come to this list for the day or for a certain time that day. I get that item on there so I can get it out of my head, and so I don't forget it if I feel it might be, valuable or important. Then I go back to the beginning and I will start my scan as recommended per Mark's amendment. The items that are highlighted, I've actually done what's called a dismissal, and that is where you cross out an item because you feel it needs to be rephrased or broken down or just somehow altered, but you want to keep the basic idea there. So for example, that first item of eye exam appointment, I realized that I couldn't action that because I actually need to find a new optometrist. So I actually noted that I dismissed that item, and I noted on 2/2, I believe, that I reworked that item in some way. And so if I flip to February 2nd, something about optometry should be there, and it is with eye doctor research. So I dismissed that item because I reworked it. And I also dismissed a couple of project items just because I need to reconsider a couple of things, or I don't have what I need. And so those are dismissed because I reworked them and rethought them. This is not a simple scan, but that's okay because it's for educational purposes, and I am aware that the camera is on, and that just might be kind of throwing me off a bit with regards to what I would typically do throughout this process. Now I'm going back to what I would normally do and an action from the end to the beginning. I haven't worked in my seasonal journal in several days. I do want to do that. And I can do I'm home. I'm in the home mindset, so I can do wash the towels in my closet. They need it. So no, I am actioning those items and noting that I action them today on the 25th. So towels and seasonal journal are getting actioned. Then going back up, I do want to remelt my candle. And so I action that for the 25th. And here I'm just going up the list. I actioned that cream colored bag clean out on the 28th of January. Haven't done a thing with it. I'm going to leave it there because I can easily do that while I'm home should I feel like I want to. Going to page 3 from the bottom. I'm not doing anything with deck trimming this weekend. I do want to review my purchase prompts and my master projects list, so I am going to action those. Not going to order prana until March. Over the stove cupboard clean out, dreading that. And notice I'm not actioning it. I have resistance toward that. Going back to page 3, I am going to email Trigon. I actioned that out of order. That page is done. So I'm going to page 2. I have those items already actioned. I'm going to leave them there because it's not like they take a long time. It's just me actually doing the thing. So I'm going to leave those there. And then I'm going back to page 1 and going at the bottom. Tarot and Oracle tiles. I think I'm going to leave those alone for now. Tarot and Oracle tiles, if you are familiar with tarot and you're wondering what I'm talking about, I don't mean like Jamie Sawyer tarot tiles. I mean these little wooden tiles that I have a ton of, and I write the names of every deck that I have and distinguish whether it's tarot or oracle, so T or O. If I'm feeling like I want to work with a deck, but I don't know which one I want to work with, or I just want the universe to pick for me, I have all these tiles in a bag, one for tarot, one for oracle, and I will just draw a tile. And that's the deck I work with, and I've had a lot of fun doing that process. And I have a few that I need to update. But I don't think I want to do it right now because I'm being pretty deliberate in how I'm choosing my decks right now. Living room park carpet cleaning, also dreading that. It's not like it's hard, but I just don't want to do it. Fetch, I can't do until I can only do within the parameters of their time and of their times and days of being open. Old Gods podcast. I started Old Gods of Appalachia back up in December, but I binged a bunch of episodes, and then I started reading Murder on the Orient Express, and I want to finish that first. And then I have this small box on my desk of just random junk, and it needs cleaned out. And I entered this on January 3rd, and it's still sitting there. And yeah, it's getting action because I think it's just a matter of sorting through some random bits of paper that I don't need anymore. So I'm just going to action that with the intention of taking care of that sometime soon. Look at me going back down. I shouldn't be going back down. So that's essentially a forward scan and then a backwards actioning. And I did add one item. Sometimes items will get on to my daily list if I just feel like I'm in a flow and I want to work from a single list versus being in my planner in this list. Sometimes those items that I feel like I want to do, I don't feel resistance to, I'll just add them to the list and then I can focus just on that one list. This list for me is really handy for when I'm feeling a bit low energy or I'm feeling a bit down emotionally, but I still want to do something. I can come to this list and it's very free flow and not structured. And I've learned that when I'm in that mindset, it's best to just not fight it. Don't try to structure myself if I'm not feeling like I'm in that space to be able to do that effectively to where it will benefit me and others around me. If it's just in a free form flowing list like this, I actually do better if I'm in that mindset of feeling down mentally and emotionally. Let's just flip my weekly over. So that's essentially how I work that list. Let's flip my weekly over. And my last insert is my book of lists. That has not changed. And then bits and bobs in my B-sides and rarities, olive, zipper pouch, and then just some bits and pieces in the back pocket. That's essentially what's happening in my planner at the moment. This is a very long video. Hopefully those timestamps will get some love because I think they might be helpful. So that was my monthly, weekly, daily mess and my resistance zero list. In addition to my Midori planner, I'll also quickly feature the other two items from my part one that are currently getting a lot of use. And the first one is my B5 Lihit Lab, which is filled with composition size Moleskine Kayers. That's a very personal book, so I don't tend to show the entries for those, but that book is being used heavily. Also currently active from part one is my seasonal journal. This is a Leuchtturm 1917 softcover B5 in the color Pacific green. It does not translate well on camera. It looks very blue, but it's actually got more of a green tint. This journal is coming along nicely. I haven't been in it as much for Aquarius season as I wanted, so I need to finish those spreads, and then I will have a flip through of my winter entries after Pisces season is over. So my seasonal journal is very active. That's all I have for this video. Until my next one, take care and be well.